Imagine standing in the middle of a frozen grassland in Eastern Europe. 25,000 years ago. The wind screams past your ears at nearly 80 kilometers per hour, carrying temperatures as low as -40 degrees Celsius. At that point, the cold doesn't just freeze you. It hunts you. Your breath turns to ice the second it leaves your lungs. Any exposed skin starts dying in less than 5 minutes. And even if you were a modern human equipped with the best survival gear on Earth, you would still be an outsider waiting for the cold to kill you. We often imagine our ancestors as frightened cave dwellers shivering around a tiny fire. But archaeology tells a completely different story. A story about some of the greatest engineers in human history. They launched a technological revolution, turning the bones of death into fortresses of survival. And to understand how they conquered a world this brutal, we need to step inside their astonishing survival methods. A world where every decision was a masterpiece of human intelligence. Method 1. Fortresses built from mammoth bones and the genius of geothermal architecture. Across the frozen grasslands, trees could barely survive. The ground was locked solid by ice, hard as stone. So ancient humans found building materials in the last place you would expect, the graveyards of mammoths. At sites like Meshirich and Kostenki, scientists uncovered structures that were far more than simple shelters. These were real buildings. Carefully planned, carefully engineered. They used massive mammoth skulls, some weighing over 100 kilograms, as the foundation of their homes. Not randomly. The heavy bones blocked freezing winds from creeping in through the ground. Huge curved tusks were arranged into dome-shaped frames, then covered with thick animal hides stitched tightly together. But the real brilliance didn't stop there. At Kostroma, archaeologists discovered deep pits dug nearly 2.5 meters underground. And those pits weren't accidents of nature. They were calculated. At that depth, the Earth itself became insulation, a giant thermal barrier that could stay around 15 degrees Celsius warmer than the deadly air above. When the environment took away their access to wood and stone, our ancestors didn't just see a graveyard. They saw a supply yard, a source of materials. They turned the greatest weakness of that frozen wasteland into one of the strongest defenses imaginable. And maybe that's the real lesson here. True creativity doesn't come from abundance. It comes from brutal limitations, the kind that force humans to look at the world through completely different eyes. Method 2. Layered thermal engineering and ventilation systems that could almost breathe. A warm shelter needed more than strong walls. It needed intelligent temperature control. At Dolny Vistonica, researchers discovered evidence of multi-layered wall systems, with each layer serving a completely different purpose. The innermost layer was made from animal hides, with the fur facing inward to trap warm air close to the body. The middle layer used moss and dry grass to absorb moisture, and the outer layer was woven from tree bark, strong enough to block the wind, while still allowing the structure to breathe. But this engineering reached another level entirely at Kostenki. There, ancient humans created a ventilation system so advanced, even modern engineers would respect it. They understood something critical. Without airflow, moisture from human breath would freeze into ice, slowly destroying the shelter from the inside out. So they designed small openings near the ground to pull fresh air inward, and larger vents near the top of the roof to release warm, damp air. That level of understanding was not guesswork, it was applied physics. Ancient humans understood that survival inside an enclosed space depended on keeping that space in balance with nature itself. And whether it was animal hide 25,000 years ago or modern insulation today, the principle of warmth has always been the same: understanding how energy moves. Method 3. The superfood energy strategy and the world's first eternal freezer. During the Ice Age, green vegetables became a luxury that barely existed in winter, and to survive in temperatures as low as -40 degrees, the human body needed an enormous amount of energy. Lean meat alone wasn't enough, so our ancestors became obsessed with one thing: fat. They hunted for bone marrow, the so-called liquid gold of the prehistoric world. And after a successful hunt, they often ate fresh organs immediately, because those organs contained the dense nutrients and calories their bodies desperately needed. But hunting during blizzards was a deadly gamble. One mistake, and you froze to death. So ancient humans developed another remarkable solution. They used the frozen earth itself, permafrost, to create underground food storage pits, the first natural freezers in human history. These frozen chambers could preserve fresh meat for months at a time. They protected food from predators. And more importantly, they guaranteed a stable supply of calories when hunting became impossible. That kind of long-term thinking changed everything. It transformed humans from desperate hunters into resource managers. Because survival isn't just about consuming what's in front of you, it's about storing, planning, preparing for the days when the sun disappears and the world turns silent. In the end, they did something extraordinary. They turned the brutal cold itself into a tool for protecting life. Method 4. The revolution of the bone needle and the survival advantage of precision. There was one tiny piece of technology that changed the fate of an entire species: the bone sewing needle. That single invention created a massive survival gap between Homo sapiens and Neanderthal. While other human species wrapped themselves in rough animal hides, our ancestors learned how to sew fitted, layered clothing designed to trap heat efficiently. They lined the inside with the fur of wolves, foxes, or rabbits, then used tougher leather on the outside for protection. And those tight, carefully stitched seams made all the difference. They transformed animal hides into true thermal armor. Clothing capable of protecting humans in regions so cold, most species could never survive there. Sometimes, a tiny technical breakthrough can open an entirely new chapter in history. Those careful stitches weren't about fashion. They were the difference between freezing to death before sunrise or surviving long enough to hunt again the next morning. And maybe that's the deeper lesson. Power doesn't always come from giant weapons or brute strength. Sometimes, it comes from the precision of a single needle. Method 5. Landscape management and an alliance with wild beasts. The most visionary survival strategy of ancient humans was that they didn't just adapt to the world around them. They reshaped it. They used fire as a tool for resource management, burning dead brush and aging vegetation to trigger fresh grass growth earlier. And that fresh grass attracted massive herds of animals closer to human settlements. But they also formed one of the boldest alliances in human history. They turned less aggressive wolves into partners. An alliance that would eventually change civilization forever. Working alongside these animals allowed humans to hunt more efficiently, using less energy while gaining far more protein through the wolves' senses and tracking abilities. Humans were never separate from nature. They learned how to conduct it, like a composer guiding an orchestra. Instead of fighting the natural world head-on, they created symbiosis. Because the strongest species isn't the one that destroys everything around it. It's the one that knows how to turn enemies into allies and fire into a tool that can feed an entire landscape. These survival methods prove something important. Ancient humans did not survive through luck. They were strategists, engineers, planners with entire seasonal systems mapped out in their minds. To build a mammoth bone shelter, they had to begin months in advance. During summer, calculating every bone, every hide, preparing everything before the snow ever arrived. And even today, modern Arctic military training programs and disaster survival organizations still study techniques remarkably similar to the ones our ancestors used 20,000 years ago. We didn't invent warmth, we inherited it from some of the most brilliant minds our species has ever produced. People who looked at piles of bones and saw fortresses, who looked into the heart of a storm and saw opportunity. So the next time a cold wind cuts across your skin, remember this. Flowing through your veins is the blood of people who refuse to surrender to the ice. We are descendants of humans who defeated the cold with creativity and with a relentless determination to keep the story of survival alive.